Kia ora and welcome to everyone. If a few of you can just let me know in the chat that you can see me and hear me. Awesome. Thanks very much for joining us today. It's great to see so many of you online and ready for this Under the Hood event, which has been quite timely in the fact that we're all at home. Hope you're all doing okay and taking some time to just make sure that you look after yourself and those around you. I know that this has been more challenging for myself personally. Even though we think that we might go back into a lockdown, we're always kind of surprised when we do. So yeah, it's kind of taken me the week to settle into it. But here we are, and we've got lots of things planned for you all in the community as we're in lockdown, including this event today. We had a webinar yesterday, and we'll be running a webinar again next Wednesday with Raul on strategy, and also a pulse check conversation on Tuesday, which will be live as a check-in with the general community. So I'd like to firstly thank the DA partners, Bookprint, Blue Tui, My Chili Bin, Portfolio Recruitment, and Streamtime. Without the key design assembly partners, these events wouldn't be possible. So a big shout out to all of you. Thanks for supporting Design Assembly since the inception, really, a lot of you, and continuing to do so. So I won't waffle on for any longer, but we'll get stuck into the presentations. So we've got two presentations today, and first up we have Sarah Bishop. Now, Sarah Bishop is a landscape architect at Isthmus, and she's based in Auckland. Kia ora, Sarah. Thanks for joining us today and sharing some of your work with us.
Thank you.
So I'll pop off. I'll stop sharing my screen and ask you to share your screen and go through your talk with us. If you'd like to ask Sarah a question, just pop that into the Q&A or the chat, and at the end of her talk, we'll pick a few of those to answer. Hand over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Louise. I'll just attempt to share my screen. Right, I assume you can see a screen full of lovely people out there. Can't quite see the chat. Hang on.
Yes, yep, okay. We can see that, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, kia ora koutou, everyone. My name's Sarah Bishop. I'm a landscape architect and urban designer with Isthmus. We are an integrated design studio with a kaupapa of deepening the relationship between land, people and culture. So this is our funky bunch of people that work across our studios, across Aotearoa, New Zealand. I am talking today about presenting a project with called Te Wānanga, formerly known as the Downtown Public Space, which now exists in the bottom of the ferry basin on Auckland's inner city foreshore, if you like. It's a project led within Isthmus by Nada Stanish, David Irwin, Alex Foxon and myself, along with support from others within our studio. Our brief was to create a public space funded by the sale and purchase of QE2 Square, which used to sit between on the corner of Queen Street and Customs. So that funded the creation of the space. It also was a replacement for this particular space. So this now extends across, as you can see, across the water space into the ferry basin. It was delivered as part of the Downtown Infrastructure Development Program alongside the ferry infrastructure project, so all the new ferry berths that extend up Queen's Wharf. As well as other projects within that program, including Quay Street and up into Britomart by our partnership or our collective of designers that Auckland Council put together. The ADO pulled together a city centre design collective of 5 landscape and urban design practices to deliver the broader program of work for Auckland Council and Auckland Transport for the community. Which I think was, it was a move to enable local designers to deliver places and spaces for our communities here rather than going offshore for that design service. So I think that was a good move by council to support local and to deliver projects that are really reflective of the principles that underpin this framework. So in early conversation with mana whenua, 3 particular principles were put forward as guiding, not just Te Wānanga, but the wider program of works. And those are miharo, which is extraordinary, to do something out of the ordinary. And we took that as both in not only in output, but in process. So to have a good partnership and engagement throughout the design and conceptualization and delivery process of these projects. To manaakitanga, this place is a place of welcome, it's a place to arrive and depart from. And to do that and create a space that does it with generosity and care was very much something that underpinned the outcome and our process. And then the third is this notion of Auckland to Tamanaki Makaurau. So how do we work to create space for people that is reflective of this place and our people? So that one particularly rang true, it's fair to say, for us and the design team. So this next slide shows the depth of partnership and the depth of conversation and just the broad range of mana whenua at the table with us, moving through from a governance level all the way through to mahi toi, so arts specialists and science and ecology specialists that came in and worked collaboratively to deliver this project and that wider program of work. It also talks to the duration of these work streams, the 10 years in the making, some of them. So, we contribute to a particular part of that, but they take a long time. And then that's just the beginning in my mind. The beginning is when people get to use these places and be within them. So in terms of process, just acknowledging place always, where we are in the world, what's the history of this place, and this is a very abridged look at that, but within the Waitemata, the Te Wānanga occupies what was and what remains water space. It sits at the junction of land and sea, of city and harbour, and this little drawing on the bottom right of the screen, the former coastal edge is quite different to what we see today with the wharves and that very linear city sort of movement out and into that space. Understanding, I guess, in terms of a tidal zone, once the foreshore is reclaimed, we lose to some degree that expression of low and high tide. So that breath between the tides and that intertidal zone, which is rich in ecology and a rich place to be. So the expression and the attention to that. And then moving through into spatial, knowing that we occupy in the creation of this space, it starts to occupy a sea space, and to do that with care and connection back to the ocean and the sea, and do that in a way that celebrates and gives mind to that ocean space. And then understanding its context in the city, it's part of a transportation infrastructure network. It's part of the city's interface with the harbour. And that's, that's been a long story that goes way back, the idea of arrival and departure from here. And then moving into sort of explorations of form. So looking to our natural landscape in this place for form and expression, which is sort of, us disrupting the ever encroaching city grid, extending out and keeping on extending out into the ocean space. So looking for a line, if you like, that gives mana back to the sea and to the harbour, and looking for a natural landscape basis for that. So you can see these sandstone tidal shelves in these photographs onto the side here, as well as how these are made up. So this idea of layering up a space, and what that does is the tide recedes in terms of holding water in some locations and not in others. So what that might mean moving forward into a spatial arrangement. So if you take that a little bit further, those spaces that hold on to the water become apertures, if you like, or voids within a surface that enable an ecology to take hold again. It also talks to the pattern. This is the ferry down in the ferry basin currently, and was there previous to the works that we've done. It's an old set of tidal stairs, and the tides moving across those and the forms that they generate. And then in those spaces, what collects there? Is it people? Is it a coastal ecology? Is it species, long gone that we can reintroduce back to this place? And then as we move into how that might manifest in a built outcome, it's a piece of cardboard with a hole punched through it and a shell. So the idea of walking along the beach, picking up a shell and listening to it, or looking through it, and the idea of focus, of attention, and recognition of the water space, and how that could then manifest into a built outcome. And that, I guess, drawing speed through our process, but drawing those together, we begin to start to establish a spatial arrangement. So what you're seeing here is this is the ferry building, the two little ferry shelters that have been in various locations actually on the waterfront for a number of years, and then Queen's Wharf up the right hand side of the page, and then your water space out here. And from that, this sentence, an elevated tidal shelf for human and coastal ecologies, I guess within that is a focus of attention, it's a description, and it's also a form and purpose. And what that starts to drive is a collection of apertures within this tidal shelf space, creating a porous surface extending out to an eroded edge. So that idea of, were we to just draw a straight line through here, you'd get so much distance for people and creatures to be. But when you articulate that edge and bring that natural form in, you create more space and more edge and more vitality, and more opportunity for people to gather as a big group or a little group, or just to be as an individual. And the punctuations within that surface, again, give light back down into that ocean space. So enable space not just for people, but for coastal ecology to take hold again, and just acknowledging, always the privilege of this space at the junction of land and sea, and of city and harbour, and what that carries. So, continuing that conversation in terms of creating space not just for people. The slide's probably a graphic designer's nightmare, but anyway, a little bit of, looking, a little bit of process, looking at what was there, holding on real tight to existing structures, and it wasn't much in terms of vegetation, things that growing on, features within the water, and then looking to people working in this space. There's a trust called Revive Our Gulf who work to re-establish mussel reefs within the Waitemata, and they have done some amazing work to start to re-establish. This is the seabed before, and this is the seabed after some of their work. So the Waitemata used to have mussel reefs and mussel beds right throughout, but they were dredged in the early 1900s, and the mussels perform quite a role in filtering water, and we all know our water quality issues that we have currently. So it's not only creating a space for habitat and biodiversity, but these creatures perform a role, not just to feed us, but to keep and enable a healthy environment for the rest of the coastal marine environment, as well as humanity, if you like. So it's a little sequence from Revive Our Golf. 1 cup of dirty water, 1 mussel, 10 minutes later. So, you know, that's their technology, if you like. And that also extended into conversation with mana whenua specialists at that point, Rochelle Kahui McConnell and Jared Walker, who were doing work with Ngāti Whātua out at Okahu Bay, re-establishing mussels on piles out there and just starting, you know, so this sort of community of specialists starting to work in this space. And this is where we, the role of Te Wānanga in advocacy for the health and well-being of the oceans became quite a focus for us, is how can we draw attention to, like we can't fix everything in one small project, but the role this project has to draw attention to that. And then, you know, how functionally we can bring that into this particular place. So you got the old seawall, this is a little transect through Te Wānanga as the design was establishing. You know, it's a typical wharf construction, albeit we probably gave them conniptions when we tried to, you know, put forward cutting holes and not using straight lines and things. There was quite a few conversations with engineers at that point. But a concrete surface suspended on a grid of, held up on a grid of piles, and looking for all the opportunities to create habitat and biodiversity within that, from the Pahutakawa forest and its underplanting, which occupy apertures within that tidal shelf area, through to floating pontoons that hasn't happened quite yet, but if we ever get the money to deliver that, I would hope that happens in a future stage, all the way out to the fender piles, which protect this space from the ferries that approach it. You know, what do all these features have in terms of a biodiversity and habitat opportunity, and also the underside of this shelf? You know, if the people are occupying the surface, if you like, the underside has an opportunity for marine ecology to establish through mussel ropes and just attachment of sea life to things. Moving through into visualizations, we have to get consent for these projects and go through sort of a community engagement process and a communication process. So this is when visualizing our work becomes very useful and important to visuals here. And they also start to talk to this being a piece of civic infrastructure, if you like. It's not just a place to be, but it is actually part of a functioning transport network. It's providing access to and from the existing ferry infrastructure, and a future stage 2 would continue that within that zone there. So it is part of city building, if you like, but it's doing it in a way that prioritises the health and well-being of people in our coastal flora and fauna as well. And then I guess into the detail. So, you know, talked about the surface structure. So diving right into the detail of what those surfaces are made of, and what the details within those surfaces can represent and talk to, from, you know, the shell, heavy shell in the mix, to these little tiny representations of those apertures, all the way back to those early design explorations, all the way out to the outer edge and the texture of that, and the ability for that maybe one day in the future to hold those plants that we saw right at the beginning before this space became. It's just offering those things back again, but also connecting through materiality and the detail of those things back to our natural landscape in a built and in a constructed sense. So drawing those connections again. And then out to the edge, so those undulating lines and that disruption of the city grid and the creation of space for people to occupy. And it's a deliberately meandering form on that outer edge. And when this opened, I saw a cyclist come off the cycleway and cycle this edge, and I thought, okay, you know, we can draw all the diagrams under the sun to illustrate what we think someone might do. And then they turned around and did it, which was amusing to watch. But the balustrade again talks back to a natural landscape, so that tide line of things washing up at a high tide of sticks and seaweeds and things. So it's deliberately light. It's holding a timber leaner edge, which in turn holds a whakaaro carving by Reuben Kirkwood Te Wairere, and that is represented also within the wider program of ferry infrastructure work as well. And then also, connecting into traditional bindings from waka construction, and those occupying that outer edge, and that sort of tactile element, as well as visible expression of mana whenua values and things within this particular landscape. And up the top right here, there's a little bit of design process, from a photograph through to 3D, modelling of what this balustrade could be, through to maquettes of, exploring binding and how it all might come together into that process. So, and then to the apertures, so the ones that sit within the space. The apertures are, I guess, there's 3 ways they've been sort of addressed, from open ones that are balustraded to ones that are having a net, if you like, suspended into them, and others that are planted. So they're all, it's the same form and approach, but just expressed in a different way. And you can see, there's a pattern, there's a particular graphic being deployed in these. There's a particular form, and they invite you to lean in. The tactile invite you to sort of run your hand along, but the pattern itself talks to a kinner shell, if you like. So again, that expression of the flora and fauna of this place. And then if you lean into those, like these 2 people are doing, and look down, these are where we start to focus our attention back into this water space, into the wakakutai, so these floating mussel waka, if you like, which a habitat and biodiversity initiative, so suspended in a line along the outer edge where the sun can get to them, and also in and around the open apertures. These provide habitat for mussels primarily, but also for a broader coastal ecology sequence. And they are utilising mussel farming technologies, and worked in collaboration with our coastal engineers at Tonkana Taylor and Rochelle and Jared Walker to develop these. And they really are, you see people leaning over to look at these. So that idea of advocacy and drawing attention to sits here, as is the sort of textural, expression using the sun and shade across these textures to celebrate the tide and the movement of sun throughout the day. In some ways, it's sort of that macro version of someone picking a shell up and looking in, the idea of leaning in and looking and listening to these. It's a public space you can hear, actually, you can hear the tide moving around these objects, which is an interesting way of listening to it. Through to the koremuremu, so the apertures that have this net or kupinga, koremuremu, suspended within them. This was a collaboration with Tessa Harris of Ngaitai Kitamaki, and going all the way back to the idea of the breath of the tide and that tidal range, and being able to feel that the breath of the ocean moving up and through this, and the ability to sit or lie or play, as these 2 little kids are doing, across that water space, and know and feel where you are in the world. And the pattern Tessa brought to the table is Aramoana, which has connections, and this one here, connection to our oceans. And then through a bit of design process with a crowd out in South Auckland, Bryden Cooks, whose day job really is to make construction lifting nets, turn their mind to this piece of mahi toi, to create something really special in our Auckland or Tamaki waterfront, and you can see a little bit of our process figuring out how big to make these little holes so that we could see, hear and feel that ocean and harbour below. And then near the end, moving towards into the planting, our Raka Rangatira Pohutakawa species, which bind our land and sea. In Tamaki, they hold on to our coastal cliffs and bind things together. They have a place here, and they are now occupying this foreshore site again. And this particular one on the right here was along Quay Street, and as part of that wider program, a number of the trees were lifted and removed for a year and a half and taken care of down the way, a wee way, and brought back into the site. Back to their, where they had come out of. So that sort of extension of coastal forest, if you like, from Te Wānanga all the way through Quay Street and up into Queen Street. So that network, talking to that wider program of work. And then those particular trees shelter a whole lot of taonga species, not normally utilised in an urban environment. Including weaving species, so again providing that connection back to the kōremu, selected in collaboration with mana whenua and supplied and installed by Ngāti Whātua in their nursery. So I guess for us it's biodiversity and a step towards bioabundance. It's beginning to create a healthy environment for healthy people. And it's creating a place to catch your breath, to hear and feel the breath of the tide. And it's a place to gather and belong. Remaking that intermediary space between land and sea, harbour and city for people and marine ecology. And at its heart, and it's an expression of Auckland to Tamaki Makaurau. So I'm going to finish off on the plants on our waterfront. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. It's an amazing project. I just really love how you're integrating all of that history and what the area was back into the area, and I'm pretty excited to get down there and check it out. I particularly love your early kind of conceptual drawings there. Is that how you always start your process, and how important is it to kind of start on paper with those kind of imaginings and concepts?
I think so. This project is a collaboration between myself and Nada Stanish and David Irwin, and yeah, I think we all approach these things in our own ways. David, I think he wrote a poem at the beginning of this one, and Nada, she's trained in fine arts, so it's always an exploration with pen and paper, and then that exploration of history, and lots of people's histories here actually, and us, we're creating space for the public, and at the same time that expression of Tamaki Makaurau, and to do that, we listen to a lot of people's voices, and we collaborate with a lot of people around the table to find what that is. So we start with a line that might express and give that mana back to the water space, if you like, and arrest that ever sort of increasing development of that city outward. So you can start from that point, and then that looking to what the natural landscape has to offer. You look backwards to see what might have been here and how that could inform a design outcome into the future. Starts to connect the place back together again. So yeah, I think always drawing, that gathering of textures, model making, 3D representation in terms of digital representation, absolutely. Just going for a walk in these places. What do you hear? Hearing the water move around, before this space was built, and now you go down there and you can hear the tide washing up against the piles. And I think that idea that you can hear a public space for me is kind of quirky, but and then you can hear the birds too, they're coming back. So it's all sorts of devices, if you like, and all sorts of methods that start to inform a design process.
And do you work on one project at a time in that sense? Because, it sounds like a very immersive and a process that, permeates your entire life while you're on this project, and in a lovely way. So I can't imagine having to handle multiple projects, but you probably do.
Yeah, I think within the design team, we're working on more than one project at once, and often on different projects from each other as well. So finding the clear headspace and time to get, in this case, around a table with a piece of paper and a pen, which we can't quite do at the moment. So we have other ways of working right now. It's always a privilege, and it's always a highly creative space to be in, around the table. Nothing better, paper and pen from the old school. If you like. Yep.
I've got a question that's come in here asking, what was your favourite part of this project?
Oh, when the fence came down and people went in. Yeah, I mean, the whole process, it's 3 years of design and documentation, and then a year and a half or so of construction. So they're long processes. But I think when our dawn blessing actually was really, really moving to move through this space as the sun rises, and have it opened in that particular way was really, really moving and really special.
Yeah.
But watching what I alluded to when I was talking before, this guy on a bike deviate off the cycleway and cruise along the outer edge of this space was, it was great to see someone just take to it immediately. Yeah.
So we've got we'll answer one more question here for you before we move on to Aaron's presentation. So Bryce asks, it's a long one, how did you overcome those hurdles of traditional straight line thinking with the planning and approval phases? Secondly, given that the Pahutakawa trees and their roots can grow huge eventually, how much does the artificial soil system set up allow for their growth over decades?
So there's a couple of questions in there. Yeah. The planning one. Interestingly, the planning, it got through, obviously, the consent process reasonably easily. There's a little bit of pushback actually on did this particular form belong from some sectors of the design community, I guess. But I guess one particular presentation that I did to the heritage people actually at council, and we're working around Victorian heritage structures, which are, linear, or, they have a character particular to them, and we're promoting this really organic line. And sitting around the table, people sitting back in their chairs, and then as you walk, you sort of step through the why and the how and what it means, that movement of people to the table, if you like, culminated in one gentleman saying that he thought it made, and this is in reference to the full project, the stages 1 and 2, made the ferry building look handsome. So clearing out the clutter that exists around it and giving space back, not just to people and to the harbour, but also to the city and the structures that exist there. So that was part of that consenting process, getting that over the line. But the most difficult were some of the constructors that used to building wharves, which are straight and square and on a grid and don't have holes in them. So they took a little bit of convincing. And then the question around Pahutakawa, the tree pits, if you like, that those trees are in, I think 10 times the size of the ones they came out of. So yes, ultimately they will limit their growth, but not before they've probably got to 2 or 3 times, or not, probably 3 or 4 times the scale that they are now. So they are there for the long haul. Pahutakawa also grow aerial roots when they need, those red tendrils that hang down from the branching structures. So that's their sort of response when they need further sustenance, if you like. They have that already inbuilt.
Fantastic. Ngā mihi, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing this project. It's been beautiful to see that process and have a look behind the scenes. So we'll ask you to stop sharing your screen now, and you can turn your audio and camera off, and I'll invite Aaron Troy to come on in. Aaron Troy is a senior brand designer at JASMAX in Auckland. And I will hand you straight over to Jared to walk through his project. And as with Sarah, just pop your questions into that Q&A there. Are you there, Aaron?
Yes, can you see me?
Yep, this.
You know, and you've got my screen?
Yes, good to go.
Cool. So I work with brand design. That is a practice group. Started about 3 years ago at JASMAX. So JASMAX is a very big company with architects and urban designers and landscape architects. So we came in as a graphic design, brand design studio with a kind of focus on brand for the built environment. So we work internally with JASMAX, but we also kind of get out the door a little bit and work with other architecture firms as well. So this particular project is a property marketing project up in Kingsland. A few credits. We were tasked with the visual identity and storytelling, but the architecture and the interiors for this were from Chow Hill, renders done by Cube, photography by a great guy, Tim D, the web stuff by New Territory, and our material sculptures by Minka, who's a great model maker. So this is the site here. It's just opposite Atomic Cafe in Kingsland. This is the existing building that's on it at the moment. We were given, as it is now, it was pretty much just a storage shed for the developer and his mates. There was a couple Mustangs in here, and then lots of boxes and old plates. So I think it was time for him to do something with it. The market was right. So here you can see it goes up to about, that is level 4, which is a big, excessively big penthouse property. And then we were given this little section back to do the display suite. So a little bit about the project. It was 33 homes in Kingsland, ranging from quite small apartments. The majority of the typologies were around that 65, 70 square meter 2-bed, but then they did also have these really premium penthouses up to 660 square meters on the top. One thing that we were lucky with the project was that the developer has lived in Kingsland, raised a family there for the last 20, 30 years. And he really wanted, it's a big apartment building that's going up in a heritage suburb, but he really wanted something that was going to contribute to the community and, not rile everyone up and get a bunch of negative press about. So this started to kind of inform our thinking around it. It's something that's inspired and driven by the essence of Kingsland, which is, a creative heart and a proudly unconventional place. So I'll talk a little bit through our process. We always start with a workshop, which is getting everyone together. We get the developers, stakeholders, anyone that we might think fits the market, the architects and the colliers, who are the real estate agency. And our workshop, our job for this is really, it's a big icebreaker. We want to get people talking, and then once people are talking and kind of flowing freely, they know a lot more about the project than we do at this point. So once we get people talking, we can kind of sit back and try to capture those little nuggets that we think can grow into something quite special for the storytelling, quite special and quite unique. So we start with this brand personality, which kind of mood boards out a bit of a vibe that we can refer back to as we go into the design phase. We look at who our buyers might be, and this is often quite speculative, but we have the agencies there who have a little bit more stats and evidence on who they think are going to be buying the properties. We look at our challenges and opportunities. And so for this project, that informed the name, The Electric, because it sits above a Vector power station at the back. So once people get to the site, there's no hiding the fact that there's a little hum and there's some big batteries, but we thought that naming it The Electric, there's some other metaphors that come with that, but it kind of broke the ice for people when they did get to the site and when they did inquire about the properties. They can, hopefully have a little laugh about it, hopefully. Then we think about our vision and our purpose. We go a little bit deeper on the project as opposed to just selling homes. And so that was where kind of Steve's love of Kingsland came in, and wanting to do something really authentic for the place. And then we look at other competing projects that are around and kind of where they land on the spectrum and where we could be with a little bit of white space. So that first part of the workshop for us, for Kingsland, landed here. You get everyone talking, and it's always a little bit slow at the start, but then eventually you just have people shouting at you and you've got post-its and you're dotting them down on the wall. So here, a few kind of metaphors that you could take. It's it's unconventional. It's got this element of craft and this progressive attitude with Chloe. These unique tastes with, this was for an animal we chose a rescue greyhound. So I had this social conscience, but it was very kind of trendy and unique. And then you couldn't go past the craft beer for the food and drink. So this page here, although it's quite abstract, that's kind of, as we're moving through the project, this is where I start to just keep going back to make sure that the tone still fits where we start off. So then I suppose skipping through the strategy pretty quick, our key idea that came out was this idea of living different. I think because there was small apartments, medium apartments, and then those big penthouses, it's a range of prices and it's a range of different people that are going to be living here. But we thought, when we do a project like this, the product is always one part of the messaging, but I think you're really selling the neighborhood, and the people that want to live in Kingsland, we thought, are people with these kind of attitudes, maybe a little bit eccentric, maybe a little bit different, a little bit quirky. And I think that's common for the smaller apartments and for the penthouses. You might not necessarily get the straight up suit and tie in the $6 million penthouse. You might get someone who's a little bit more different. And then that kind of led itself to this play on Live Electric, which again goes back to that idea of just being quite upfront with the substation that's out the back. It's got the double meaning of live electric, and this started to inform our kind of type treatment as well, just keeping it quite utilitarian, almost like the warning signs that you kind of get plastered on the cinder block walls, but obviously not too explicit. So Live Different and Live Electric was really our driving factor to get people interested in the project. So then once we have that, once we kind of have our key idea, our organizing idea, and a bit of a system set up, then it's about generating assets. And that's when we get to bring people like Tim in, who's an incredible photographer. I've been a fan for a while, but the electric was the first time that we used him, but I think he's our go-to man now. He's great at capturing really authentic moments. And that's what we wanted to do for this as well. I think we wanted to show Kingsland in its best light and show the grit that comes with Kingsland and just be as authentic as possible about it. So one of our content streams was these neighbours of Kingsland and looking at the different people that are doing different things, the artists and the crafters. So we've got our brewers up at Urban Flowers, which is just across the road from Mount Eden and has been there for decades. So that was a business that our client's local knowledge put us onto. Vitrine, who restore and sell antique furniture, and Petra Schwammer, who are a beautiful little family-owned business who make amazing Jordanian food. And then capturing the place, Canton Cafe, the establishment, the view over Eden Park from the ridge, this kind of, back alley neon dining that captures the essence of Kingsland quite well. And then these big green spaces and this concrete playground, this kind of urban recreation place. And then the great thing with Tim is that we give him a brief and we give him some mandatories of what we want to capture, but then he always takes it on himself to go a little bit further. And so he took out his film camera and captured, a full roll of shots, which he gave us to use as well, which I think, especially looking at shots like this of the train tracks and this one here of the bikers down New North Road, I think as far as real estate marketing goes, it's quite nice to see something that's not overly polished and overly kind of falsified and saturation turned right up. So he did a great job there. And then when we were thinking about the renders, we had these different personalities in mind. So the same with the photography, how we wanted quite an eclectic kind of set of photographs to show this idea that Kingsland can give you something new every day. And it's got, the old and the new. So we came up with, from our buyer profiles and the strategy, we came up with a few buyers. One is the older bachelor gentleman, who I think is modeled slightly off of our client, although he's not a bachelor, but he picked the speakers out. And this guy here, he's got the old couch. He's got a whole bunch of memorabilia and a whole bunch of stuff that he wants to fit in his apartment. So we wanted to show that there. This is the YoPro Yogi. She's a little bit more pragmatic, health conscious. She likes to walk out here in the morning and see the greenery on her deck and you know, wake up to the sun coming through into her bedroom. And then the bigger apartments might be these kind of fabulous entertainers here with the wild gold chair. This render here, the studios are given a nice outlook from this internal courtyard garden, but this water feature here is actually put in by the architects to counter the white noise that you get from the substation, which is just down there. So I think it's a nice feature, and it's kind of just responding to what's around it. So then we have all of our assets. So it was time to kind of put them together, and I suppose this is our art making opportunity here. So initially we came up with the name quite early, but I think when we started in the design, we got drawn quite easily into the neon and the kind of the light play and the obvious metaphors that come with the electric, and it wasn't really working for us. So I spent a morning and just had to get off the computer and go and get a coffee and walk around. And then it really inspired this idea of layering and this kind of the old rock posters that are being torn off the walls and this layering of information over time. So we had this collage approach that we took, all with the assets that Tim captured for us and that we had made in the renders. And then we created these different artworks that responded to these different personas. So there's that yogi persona here, and that bachelor persona over there. And once we had these, you could kind of crop in, and it just made this really nice, unique texture that gave us a bit of scope to work with, and also was pretty unique for a property project like that as well. So I think you see stuff like this, and I feel like it kind of really captures the essence of Kingsland, but most importantly, it just gets people interested and gets people looking a little bit further into what it's about. We made a newspaper, which was kind of our sales brochure, but we didn't want it to be too sales centric. I think there's a nice little story there which kind of goes with the vision of the brand, and the developer just paid his son's rugby team to drop them all around Kingsland. So there's sales messaging in this, but it's also just our renders paired with our artworks, and then some creative copywriting that's all a little bit abstract and a little bit ambiguous. And the two functions of this were really to get buyers who would be interested in a property inquiring about it, but also just to let the people of Kingsland kind of know what's coming and get the general community more excited about the prospect of an apartment building going up, rather than the common stigma that can happen, especially with older suburbs like that. So you can see how the renders pair with the with our artworks there. And then we got a big, beautiful middle spread that showed off these enclosable balcony spaces that were a big selling point. So I think by this point, you've got all the assets together. We've got a bit of a system with how the type's working. So everything becomes a little bit easier and you just get to bring it all together. So the website looked like this. The homepage was just a big long gallery scroll that mixed our renders and our artwork, and then some of these some of our neighbors and some of the lifestyle imagery. So it was really just kind of showing off the full range of assets that we had. And then these guys are one of my favorite. So in the display suite, you, well, for a project like this, you'll generally have two finishing schemes that people can choose from. And then you make a display for the display suite that shows these two, where the buyers can touch them and they can choose what scheme they want. So generally that's either on the wall or that's in a tray, or they're just loose that you can touch. But we thought for this, it was a nice play on that idea of the different personalities and these different characters of Kingsland. If we made these little kind of troll-esque figurines in the two different schemes. So you can see the materials that have been used to the actual display bathroom that we have. And I think it's nice just being a little bit lighthearted with things like this as well. Like, I look at them and I get a little smile, especially this one that reminds me of an old kind of 90s school portrait. And then in the display suite, these guys kind of bring it all to life as well. So I think for the display suites that we do, usually they're not up for very long. It might be 6 to 9 months. The spaces that you're given are going to be demolished at the end for the apartments to go up. And I think it's nice just kind of accepting that fact and being pretty low touch on what you do. So not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars making a fully polished retail environment, but really just playing on the fact that this was essentially in a garage. We've just got our panels printed on some cut pieces of timber, made our plinths out of blocks, pretty efficient stainless steel table on casters that we made. And then the display kitchen and the display bathroom through here. And you can see our little men standing on their plinths, kind of at different angles. You walk in and it already feels like there's a little bit of life in the space, which is nice. So that's my quite brief presentation. But
awesome.
I'd like to just say what's next. So this is quite exciting for us for brand design, because JASMAX has a project coming up in Epsom where the brand, the architecture and the interiors have all been developed side by side. So instead of coming into the process after resource consent and working through marketing, we've actually started during concept design, and the brand and the storytelling has been able to inform the architecture. And we have an interior designer in our team now who's been able to kind of take the brand and interpret that for the interiors. So eyes on this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. It's great to see that in your whole process. My question is, do you always come up with an animal that represents the brand?
Most of the time, yeah. But
yeah.
You have to mix them up. You have to mix them up a few times, because you get drawn down similar holes a lot. Like tui will always come up, and your native birds. So you got to get people talking, and no idea is a bad idea, but then kind of keep pushing it a little bit more, I think. Yeah,
fun. Sounds like a fun part of the project. So we've got a question here from someone anonymous. Do the studio apartments have bedroom doors?
Bedroom doors?
Yeah.
No, it's just
No.
it's a big slider. Well, it's a big sliding wall.
Okay, cool. And then Charlotte's asking, what was the time frame on this project?
We started the strategy last December, and then I think we would have gone to market in maybe May, possibly. It was pushed out a few weeks, but I think generally for projects like that, it looks around 3 to 4 months. So unlike the architects and the landscape architects who are on their projects for about 4 or 5 years, we get a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah. And Sophia would like to know, did you have any pushback from the developers on your ideas?
No, I think that workshop up front is really important, and it's important to get the ideas, but then it's also important that the ideas aren't our ideas. It's everyone else that's been having this conversation, and we've really just listened. So when we present the strategy back, and then when we present the design back, nothing should ever really feel new for anyone. It's stuff that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
So ideally no, but you always get pushback on some things.
Yeah. And Bryce would like to know, can I ask what the typeface is for electric?
That is Founders Condensed Semi-Bold. And we chose the typeface before we put it on the facade, and it just so happened that it locked up perfectly into that facade on the front of the building. So it must have been fate.
Yeah, awesome. Are there any more questions that people would like to ask of Erin? Cool. All right. Well, I'll ask you to stop sharing your screen now.
Cool.
Great, fantastic. Well, I'd like to just wrap it up now and say a big thanks again to Erin and Sarah for sharing their projects and their process behind them. It's very generous of you to do so. And thank you to all of you for attending. If you've got any ideas for people or projects that you'd like to see in this format, pop those into the chat, or you can always send me an email, louise@designassembly.org.nz. And I think we'll look to do another one of these under the hoods in the next few weeks while we're all at home. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and get outside and get some fresh air, and finding it okay to be creative in this environment. But again, just let us know generally at Design Assembly if there's anything you'd like to see, who you'd like to hear from, or any resources or help you may need. Ngā mihi, and have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone.